Oh, so here we are doing I
Already
am
how about muting?
okay, yes, the muting. All right. So please unmute for any reason you deem a reason. All right, we are in Sri Nisargadatta's I Am That on chapter 24. God is the all-doer, the Gyani, the non-doer. And, in all the paths, just as kind of a side note, I was thinking about this earlier this week. In all of the paths, God exists, but what God or how God is observed or how God is treated or how God is packaged, if I can say such a horrible thing, is a little bit different. In Jnana, God is more of the divine principle. There's not really an anthropomorphic or even an identified uh, God involved in the day to days of things. He's more the divine principle by which everything functions, but really doesn't have a horse in the race, as it were, is not really attached to all of it. The horses in the race happens when he attaches to what we think is us, right? He's actually living the life in this body. There's no Swami C here at all, but it's the Lord living and enjoying life through this mind and through this body, just like we do in a dream. But that little interaction between the infinite and the finite creates a little whirlpool. And that little whirlpool is egoism. And so we are kind of a byproduct of the presence of God attaching to a particular. So we're that byproduct, but it's actually God living this life. And in the later stages of prayer, that becomes one of the most beautiful aspects of being alive is knowing the deep intimacy that infers. And it's a little troubling when we come to realize more and more that we are an imaginary whirlpool, that that there really is nothing named Swami C at all. That becomes a little challenging. Of course, Jnana is very happy about that, because the more the ego disappears, the more the bliss of being increases. For the bhakti, that's why Ramakrishna said, be careful, bhaktas, about which Jnanic scriptures that you read. That Jnana has a way of undoing devotion because of that very thing. It keeps trying to dissolve the devotee. And so two different paths, two different means of coming to the same realization, and God is slightly different in each one. And so it's none of the paths do without God. That's one of the things I want to remind everybody. In Jnana, it's not God who disappears, it's you. And so, as we approach Jnanic scriptures, understand that Jnana is more about your own dissolution than it is about God as such in that way. And it's more you coming to the knowledge, the true knowledge of what's up, which means that God alone is real, all else is unreal. That which is unchanging alone is real, that which changes is unreal. And so Thakur gave us those 2 pointers. Sri Ramakrishna gave us those 2 pointers to understand how to discern in this world. So if something changes, it's unreal. That which is unchanging alone is real. And to save you the time that I had to spend figuring out what that meant, I'll just tell you, Prabhupada told me that in you, which is looking for the unchanging, is the unchanging thing that you seek. So don't forget to look there. But you can only look intuitively, because you can't look at yourself, right? You can't look at yourself. You can see your reflection, but you have to recognize the reflection, because we are seeing our reflection. Everything that you taste, touch, hear, and smell is your reflection. But you keep picking a particular out of it, saying, no, just that is my reflection. But the whole thing is your reflection in mind. All right, so our asked questioner this morning is wanting to know Is God and the Mahatma, are they one or two? God and the great soul. And of course, since the end conclusion of all paths is one without a second, Maharaj doesn't waste any words. He says they are one, right? So the soul, whether it's individuated or not individuated, the Mahatma and God, they are one. So he is beyond and within, creating and uncreated, creating and destroying and unimaginably real. Unimaginably real. What a wonderful way of saying that. Unimaginably real. Anything that you can imagine immediately becomes unreal, because if it's imagined, it's changing. It's a reflection, right? So that which is unimaginably real is that which we are surrendering into. I say seeking, but seeking is all right as an idea that we're looking for God, but as a method, it's a failure. You can't seek God. Yeah. Because God is never in front of the senses. He's never in front of the ego. God is always behind, because God is the very source. God is the being that's searching. And so looking for God is not a solution, but it's a good description of what we're trying to do. So you can see what a confusion we're in. But really, that which we seek is only not found because we're seeking it, meaning we assume that we don't have it. We assume that non-presence. We assume that separation. And then we go searching. But the assumption was incorrect, because we are in and through God. There is nothing else but the divine manifesting in dream form in this world. So God and Mahatma, they are one. The questioner says, no, there must be some difference. Maharaj, God is the all-doer. The Jnani is a non-doer. All right, so that's the first thing. And Thakur tells us this all the time. And it's interesting that he does, because it doesn't seem like the beginning is the right time to tell somebody this, but he tells it, many times throughout the gospel, that we are not the doer. And I think that that's a wonderful koan type statement, in the fact that it really does force you to undo the way that you think. It forces you really to look at the way that you see things with a very different imperative, because we've always assumed doership. All of our karmic story requires on a sense of doership. And yet, the scriptures tell us again and again, through multiple sages, not just Hindu sages, but through multiple sages, from multiple traditions and paths, that ultimately we are not the doer, that we are the characters in a dream. And characters in the dream, even though they're all doing, it's the dreamer who's actually activating all of the characters in the dream, even though the characters in the dream are unaware of the dreamer. And even though all the characters in the dream have their own egoism and their own sense of self-actuation. And so this is the state that we find ourselves in. We're trying to realize we're dreaming while we're still asleep. And it's possible, and it's promised, and it's coming for all of us. But this is the place where we start thinking and pondering this puzzle that we are not the doer. What is the doer then, right? But let's go ahead and finish his answer so I don't take it somewhere else. God himself does not say, I am doing all. To him, things happen by their own nature, right? Because we're talking about God, which is non-egoism. God is not a particular. He doesn't have a will as such. He doesn't have a plan as such, because as from the perspective of the divine, perfection reigns. Constantly, the world is in perfect balance. From the seer of all, from that one perspective where everything can be seen simultaneously, he sees the perfect balance. This is that way because of that, and that is that way because of that. But even at that level, he's not seeing things like that, because he is not seeing anything. That is not seeing anything. She is not seeing anything, right? Because there is no second. There's nothing to observe. Once you find what you're seeking for, you find that you were the seeker and the thing you sought. And once those things collapse into a singularity, there's no sensual experience. There's no experience. There's simply being. And so to him, God would not say, I am doing all, one, because he has no sense of individuality or I that's separate and apart from the whole. And two, doing all, there's nothing being done from that perspective. Number one, it's simply isness. To him, things happen by their own nature, well, that's an interesting statement that he's making. Things happen by their own nature. God in this world sees it that way. The dreamer in the dream sees it that way. The enlightened soul sees it that way. But to God, I don't think things happen. In the highest realization, certain anything below the highest, anywhere where there's any God has any attribute at all, he has stepped into a lower level of consciousness, and in those levels, things appear to happen. So he says things happen by their own nature. To the Jnani, all is done by God, right? So the practitioner, the Jnani, the one who's doing his practice, he understands in the later parts of that practice anyway, that God is the only doer. That the reason God has no will is because if it occurs within the mind of the divine, it is. There's no time between those two things. If you're all powerful, what you want happens immediately. You don't have to worry about how to make it happen. It simply happens immediately because you are omniscient and omnipotent, right? Both God and the Jnani know themselves to be the immovable center of the movable, the eternal witness of the transient. The center is a point of void, and the witness a point of pure awareness. They know themselves to be as nothing, therefore nothing can resist them. So this is interesting. I like the things this puts in the mind. Both God and the Jnani know themselves to be the immovable center of the movable, right? So they share the one center. So even though they're seeing two different perspectives, they know the one center. I was thinking about fire and its power to burn. That's often how the power of God and God are kind of broken into two. The manifestation or word or Shakti, and then the unmanifest, the one without a second, the essence, the noun of all things, the full potential. And the only reason we can separate fire and its power to burn is because it hits two different senses, right? The eyes see fire, and the sense of touch sees the power to burn. They only seem as two because of the senses through which we're observing them. You're seeing them through two of your senses, and so the mind breaks them into two pieces. And this goes back to that problem of why we can't find God by going through the senses, because we're always getting things broken into five pieces. The unity that we're actually living in, the singularity, the one without a second that we're actually within, comes to us in five different pieces. And so immediately we're in a world of multiplicity. And then the mind trying to recreate that unity by drawing lines of relationship between all of these five disparate pieces of information that it's constantly taking in, tries to create that reality that it intuitively knows is one. Right? That's why it's a relative world, because we take all of these disparate pieces of multiplicity and we draw relationships with them together. We tie them all together with a sense of relationship, a sense of cause and effect sometimes as one of the options, but just parts of a whole. And so we're cobbling together finite pieces to try and create or recreate an infinite oneness, which of course is why it's very frustrating and can't be done. And even us, the doer, at some level will know that we are the immovable center of all, that we will come to identify ourselves purely with the witnessing aspect of ourself and not as body mind. And as we do that, we don't understand at that point necessarily that God and I are one, because we still have a sense of experience, a sense of egoism, small as it may be at that point, still a sense of separation, right? And so the Jnani sees that all is done by God. He sees no difference between God and nature, right? Because now he's not really using the senses. He's not really identifying himself with nature, but he sees as the observer that that function is a whole, a completeness. You know, the observed is this half, and the observer is this half, but without either one of them, neither of them could manifest. You know, neither one of them could experience as such. So he sees this nature, this observed world, and the observer, and understands that they are the unity, and that's kind of the final understanding, that they are not two at all. There's no difference. That's when Ramakrishna says, you know, you take your stairs to the roof of the building, and the stairs are all made of lime and bricks and brick dust and whatnot. And then you get up to the roof and you realize, wow, not only were the way up here, the path that I followed to get here, not only was that bricks and brick dust, but the roof itself is also bricks and brick dust. So you see that all things come from that one without a second. You come to that final realization. Both God and the Jnani know themselves to be the immovable center of the movable, the eternal witness of the transient. All right. We talked about this relative world where nothing has a value without something else, right? That's why we require a duality, actually, in order for this thing to hold its shape in our mind. And if there wasn't a singular, absolute, unchanging, immovable in the middle of this relative world, the world would just simply collapse. It wouldn't hold its shape. You know, space-time would just black hole, as it were, because there would be no central tent posts. There would be no original from which everything is measured, no original from which everything gets its value. It seems to be a necessity in a relative world that there has to be an absolute unchanging center to it. So, and you are that. And the other way of talking about it is the witness of the transient. You and me are one in the sense that that which is watching through our apparatus, through this body mind, is one. It's the same in all of us. If all of our egos could turn around right now 180 degrees and look inward, we would all see each other. And we would see that there's a single pole of awareness that we are all using to run our bodies and minds, right? But it's a common pole to all of us, as it were. We would all bump into each other, no matter where we are in the world. We would bump into each other where we are if we were able to turn our ego around and look at what's powering it. Look at the eternal witness. If the witness could see itself, we would see that we are all using the same one in there. So you've got that immovable center of the movable, that one absolute changing tent pole that holds the big top up, keeps it from just collapsing, right? And you've got the eternal witness of the transient, that one thing which is unchanging, which is observing all change, right? And so in order to observe all change, we have to be unchanging or unmovable. And I always use that elevator or a car window. You know, if you're looking down inside the car, there's no indication aside from the bleed over, like some vibration in the car, or maybe mother turns too fast or something. But there's no sense that you're moving because you are a part of the change. Same thing in an elevator. When that door closes, there's no real indication that you're moving, except for the imperfections of rattling and whatnot. We're wiping that out for now. That there's no indications of movement in a perfect elevator. You know, the door opens in one place, closes, and then opens in a new place. And it's magic. And so it's because if you get an elevator with a window, or if you look out the window of the car, then you get the sense of movement. You know that you're moving because you are no longer a part of the movement of what you're observing. right? So you can see the movement. And I'm getting into all of this to say that we are immovably and unchangeable is absolutely necessary to give us the ability to observe all change. If we were within any of that change, we would be moving with that change, and it would not appear to move to us. And so the fact that we can observe all change going on in the universe indicates that we are unchanging, that we are not a part of that movement as the eternal witness, right? As a body, we get some of that and some not. Like right now, we all seem to be sitting very still. I'm sitting in this chair. Nobody would ever think that I'm moving at millions of miles an hour in multiple directions right now, because it just seems so calm and so still, and there's nothing moving, because the body mind is a part of the change. So it can't see or sense the twirling of the earth around its axis, and it can't see or really experience in a real way the flying of the planet around the sun, and the sun around the galaxy, and the galaxy shooting out into nowhere at ungodly speeds. We aren't aware of any of that, because as body minds, we're a part of it. But even that, the eternal witness outside can see even that, can experience even that. Both Gyani and God know themselves to be immovable centers of the movable and the eternal witness of the transient. The center is a point of void, right? There's no material there. It's spirit, whatever that is. So the center is a point of void, and the witness a point of pure awareness, right? And he's made the point that this is really the same thing. The center is a point of void, meaning it has no objects in it. It's just that. And the witness is a point of pure awareness. And pure awareness, as he said earlier, pure awareness has no objects in it. If you put objects into awareness, you have consciousness. But pure consciousness or awareness has no objects in it. There is no second to it. It is simply pure awareness. They know themselves to be as nothing, therefore nothing can resist them. So to perceive them, to know themselves to be as nothing, it's a nothing that is pure potential, because it is also the nothing that is everything. It's like the black light of the night sky. The night is full of billions, trillions of stars, of suns, shining brightly in the sky. And yet it's seen as blackness. Why? Because there's nothing reflecting that light. And so when God is in pure awareness, there is no egoism to reflect the light of awareness, right? In that pure state of being, everything is pure potential, and nothing is reflected, because there is no second at that point. And so it appears as nothingness. It appears as emptiness. And it's accurate to call it emptiness and nothingness. It's also equally right to call it fullness. It's just two ways of talking about something that can't be talked about. Because when you have one without a second, there's nothing to describe. So if you describe it, you're wrong. But since we seem to experience something that needs description, it can be seen closest to true as being emptiness or void or fullness of potential. So the questioner says, well, how does this look and feel in your personal experience? Maharaj, being nothing, I am all. That's a good little meditation snippet right there. Being nothing, I am all. Right? If I have no particular identity, then I can know myself to be everything. If I choose or take on an attribute of any kind, I'm limited. I'm restricted. I suddenly don't have access to whatever is on the other side of that attribute, as it were. Right? It will cast a shadow on me. That's why Vivekananda says this personality that we love so much is only a collection of limitations and restrictions. Right? This personality that we have is just a choosing a list of restrictions and limitations. I'm a man, which means I can't be a woman. I'm 60, which means I can't be 25. I'm American, which means I can't be Indian. I'm white, which means I can't be Mediterranean. It's just a list of attributes that we've owned, and each one of them limits us and makes us smaller. And so practice is going inward and finding out who you really are so that you can slough off these attributes that prevent you from knowing yourself, that prevent you from knowing what you are. And what you are is everything or nothing. You can say it means the same thing. By being nothing, you're not limited from being everything. Or by being everything, you're not limited by being everything, right? But he's saying, being nothing, I am all. So that's the direction he's choosing. As nothingness, meaning I have no attributes, means or infers that I can adopt any attribute, right? If I have white hair, meaning hair with no color, it's just like the color white. I mean, it's a great example right there. The color white can be the color white, which would mean it's nothing else. But in fact, the color white is all colors, right? It's reflecting all color back to you, which comes to you as white. But we can see through a prism that white light is not white. It's got all the colors of the rainbow in it. And so God. So being nothing, I am all. Everything is me. Everything is mine, right? Swami Prabhupada one time told me that. It was a funny little interchange, actually. We were talking about desire. Then he was telling me, make the world your own. Just assume you own everything, and then there's no reason to desire it. He says, I can go down to Nordstrom's, and he said it, that's exactly what he said. I can go down to Nordstrom's, and I can try on all of my clothes, and I can wear them all around the store as long as I want, look very nice and appreciate them. And then I hang them back up in my Nordstrom closet and I go home. So it was having that kind of notion of the world. Don't feel like this is all your very own. It's all your very own. So being nothing, I'm all. Everything is me, right? Which is beautiful love. That's the fulfillment of love, because there'll be perfect empathy between you and everything, which will make you the one perfect servant of everything. And it makes you the one great soul of compassion, because you will understand the suffering of everything fully. And you will know instinctively how to help everything as yourself helping yourself. Everything is me, everything is mine. Just as my body moves by my mere thinking of the movement, so do things happen as I think of them. This is a great secret here, because we kind of all think that when I get, the more illumined I get, we still hold on to that illumination as an attribute or a belonging to me, right? And so we get a wrong idea. We think that then, I become as powerful as God, and whatever I think happens. You could look at it that way. It might even be able to be experienced that way. But what's actually happening is that as you lose your ego, the divine will and your will are merging, because the divine will is the perfect will without any delusion. And your removal of ego is the removal of your delusion. And so your will and the divine will begin to align, and you start to experience a world that does what you think. Examples of that, Ramakrishna, when he wanted to build that wall around the Panchavati, right? Or that fence. And as soon as he had the thought, up on the banks of the river flow all of the tools, all of the wood, all of the nails, everything that he needed to build that fence washed up on the shores of the Ganges. And you think, oh, wow, what a quinky dink. How interesting that is, right? And so as you grow in spiritual life, which means as you begin to lose that sense of separateness, that sense of egoism, then that inner presence, the inner light of the divine, begins to shine out more purely through your mind, because the ego is not blocking it and directing it anymore. And the divine will and your will begin to become a singular will. And you come to realize that you were not surrendering to something external in the sense of you had to give up everything you wanted so that you could get what God wanted, which is the common experience at the beginning of spiritual life. You're like, well, why do I have to do everything like God says? Why does he have to be the one that gets to decide all these things? What you come to understand is that God is you in perfect form. And so you in your perfect form are the will of God. And as you grow in spiritual life, you begin to see this, you begin to experience this. The world becomes more and more in line with what your own mind is. So do things happen as I think of them? Mind you, I do nothing. I just see them happen, right? Just what he's talking about. Remember when I sit and do this? I don't know how I'm doing that. I have no idea how that happens, how that works. All I have to do is think of it, and it goes. And so that's God's relationship, as it were, big quotes, God's relationship to nature, to the universe. It simply is his own manifestation. He just thinks, and it does, whatever it is. There's no will behind it. There's no plan behind it, because there's no need for will. There's no need for a plan. He's outside of time and perfect, in absolute balance. Questioner, do things happen as you want them to happen, or do you want them to happen as they happen? Yes, okay. Maharaj, both. I accept and am accepted. I am all, and all is me. Being the world, I am not afraid of the world. Being all, what am I to be afraid of? Water is not afraid of water, fire of fire. Also, I am not afraid because I am nothing that can experience fear or can be in danger. I have no shape nor name. It is attachment to a name and attachment to a shape that breeds fear. I am not attached. I am nothing, and nothing is afraid of no thing. On the contrary, everything is afraid of the nothing. For when a thing touches nothing, it becomes nothing. It is like a bottomless well. Whatever falls into it disappears. Right? Disappears, but disappears in the sense of being a separate object. Disappears in the sense of having limitations and restrictions that separate it from the whole. It's the boundaries that fall away, not the thing itself. The thing returns to its true essence, which everything has the same true essence, that isness. One step beyond Satchitananda, one step beyond love, wisdom, and being, right? Everything shares that same infinite nothingness, or the infinite potential of everythingness. Questioner, well, isn't God a person? Maharaj, well, as long as you think yourself to be a person, he too is a person. When you are all, you see him as all. Very interesting. If you identify as a body-mind, you're going to see this world in a very particular way. You're going to see God in a very particular way. Because it's a relative world, everything has to relate to you as you perceive yourself to be. As that perception grows, as you get closer and closer to the truth, the nature of the world to you will also get closer and closer to the truth. And that's what brings us to enlightenment, right? That's also what takes us away from enlightenment. Because we continue to attach and we continue to increase those attachments, right? Things, following desires, running after desires increases your attachment. Doing things for pleasure increases your desire for that pleasure. And ultimately you become dependent on that pleasure for your idea of self to function. And you become dysfunctional when that pleasure is no longer available to you. So this is why the whole idea of right and wrong was introduced, because we create them through our desires, through our attachments. And to get out of them, we have to understand their nature. And in the beginning, to understand their nature, it comes in the form of don't do that. because you have to get that little bit of separation in order to be able to observe the thing and understand why don't do that is the best route, or why do that is the best route, depending on the case. Does that make sense? Am I off in a bundle of confusion by myself at this point, or everybody?
Makes sense.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Just checking. All right. Isn't God a person? As long as you think of yourself to be a person, he too is a person. When you are all, you see him as all. This. Oh my God. My head just kind of wants to fall open at this point, because if you take this one statement, oh my God, it just unfolds infinitely into really wonderful, usable, relatable experiences of life. This is where, what you see in yourself is what you see in others, which is the whole thing Mother was trying to teach us when she says, do not see the faults of others. See your own faults. Learn to make the world your own, right? This is why love begins inside you. How you talk to yourself, how you treat your mind. That's where love begins. That's where equanimity begins. To how you observe yourself is how you're going to see others. That's how we know what people's faces mean. It's like, if I look at you, like, you're going to assign a meaning to that. And you're going to do that by remembering the last time you made your face look like. And you're thinking, oh, he's feeling the same thing I was feeling when I did that. And so that's how we learn to understand each other's facial expressions, each other's actions, each other's words, just simply because we understand our own use of those actions and our own use of those words and what we're trying to describe with those words. And you also find how clunky our communication is in this world. Right now, as I try to put all of this crazy thought into words, is one thing. But then all I can do is give you these words, these sounds. And what are you doing? You're projecting your own meanings for those words, how you would use those words, onto what those words are. And so that's the best we can do at communication. That's the best that we can do. But when we know ourselves to be nothing, I get your entire thought process along with the words. I had this experience with Moksha Prana, where for the only time in my life that I've ever experienced it, I've never before that and not since that have I had this experience where she gave me those two words. It's okay. That's all she said in my head, in this vision. But with those two words came everything that she put into them, all of her experience, knowledge, all of her history, everything that had a nuance to it that gave those two words meaning came with the words. And I got the whole package. At one time. There was no interpreting. I didn't have to learn, understand, sort through, figure out, nothing. 1 second, I didn't know anything. And the next second, I knew everything she intended to tell me, as if it was my own experience, as if it came out of my very own self. And so this is the reality. This is what gives me my excitement about it, because I'm still just as lost as any rock on the beach at this point in my life. But I can constantly remember what that experience was. I was like, doggone it, it's helped faith so much, because I can honestly tell you, yes, of course, this world is not what it seems. Things are not as they seem to be, and just don't get too troubled by the way things are. Don't get too bothered by the way things are, because it's going to wear out. It's going to fall off at some point. And we're going to know all of this firsthand, as strange as it seems,
Maharaj?
Yes.
I would also think that she perhaps unlocked it, that it was already in you, that just as you read a book and you will only get what is in you already, so one person gets less and the other more, it's because it's in you. It's so all that information was there. She probably just unlocked it. She didn't give anything, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, well,
Mm.
I would suspect you're absolutely right. It comes from that idea that she and I are not actually different, that she actually was only in my mind to begin with, as I am in yours right now, and you are in mine, because we're both borrowing a mind that we can appear in together. But I think you're absolutely right, and all of this teaching, all of scripture, it's all the same thing. It's Vivekananda says that in his lecture on education. Education is not adding facts to the mind, it's uncovering the innate, infinite wisdom and knowledge that is within us. That's why when we learn something, we're like, Eureka! It doesn't come from the outside, it's a realization. We
Mm.
suddenly see it as it was. Newton with the apple falling on his head. Hey, apples have been falling on heads for years and years and years and years. But this one time it hit his head and boom, new thinking and new something. Nothing was added. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And that's the coming knowledge that we're on the train to understand is ultimately everything has been within us. There was no external to us. That there is this that that's what Vivekananda said. I am not in Alameda, that city. I'm not in that city. That city is in me. He meant it literally. He didn't mean it philosophically. He meant it literally. Everything is in me. And even practicing that, like, I shared this, I think, a week ago. So it's a new thing that occurred to me to try, was this idea of everything being in me. And so when I see that person, like the other day, I was on the bus and some high school kid got on and was playing a little radio, his phone actually, but playing it louder than the speakers were good for on his apparently quite cheap phone. And he was playing this, thump thump music, which had a terrible tinny sound to it, just horrible. And he gets on the bus, he's playing it, and you know when he gets on that he's doing it, he's challenging anybody anywhere to say anything about it at all. And so he's sitting there, and I'm kind of, at first I'm buying into the game. I'm sitting there, thinking about swatting this thing out of his hand at some point. And then I was sitting there kind of like, oh, I was like, okay, you're a swami. you, you can't go over and swat the kid's phone out of his hand. That's not the thing to do. And actually, you shouldn't even be thinking about it. It should absolutely not bother you at all, because what is there to be bothered, and who is there to bother? And so that led me to think, and he's in you. This bus isn't, he's a part of you. He's a part of your own dream. You have given him reality. You have given him existence. And just by changing that notion, just by making him part of me, uh, it's amazing how just naturally the annoyance kind of goes away. It was just like, I could see me doing that. I could understand his expression of his ego as being pleasurable to him in that moment. I could understand that. I could see that. And I could see that my pushing against it was my own satisfaction in the use of ego, to see him as separate and other and opposing. And so just a very simple notion of, like, when you see someone who's annoying you, when some toddler is driving you nuts, or some anybody, use this as a means of practice. Just look at them and say, you're in me. I am you. I'm giving you existence. I have given you existence. We're both using the same mind to observe each other. And it just changes the dynamic. It just changes the general sense of your relationship with things. You begin to realize that it's all a relationship with yourself, that there's nothing outside of you. And so that's one way of grabbing these seemingly impossible Advaitic truths and bringing them down to a usable form at our appropriate level of delusion, and using them, still finding light through them. And so this is the power of meditation. This is what happens when you start to go silent in the presence of Mother. She starts polishing these things for you. She starts bringing them up and giving you your little aha moments.
Swami.
Yes.
Hello. I
Hi.
just had I wanted to share something. I was listening to a spiritual teacher on YouTube this morning, and he said that your acceptance of the teenager on the bus with the music, and um, we had another person about a week ago or 2 weeks ago say when he accepted the person upstairs having the party, um, playing the Macarena. Um, he said that's like you are the bird in the nest waiting for nourishment, and the one without a second, the divine mother, is the mother bird coming with the worm, and you've decided to finally open your mouth and accept the nourishment, the spiritual nourishment that's there. And he said that when um she's always there with the worm, and it's just for us to open our mouths, and we'll be fine. I thought that was appropriate to what we're talking about right now.
Yeah, I thank you. You're absolutely right, because I see that as sort of a secondary truth. One of the theorems that fly out of the axiom, uh, that when you do take that notion of everything being you, being one, you can hear things better. Was it us? Who was I talking about talking to redwood trees? Was that us the last time we were talking? I don't know, but this notion that the Avadutta Gita and the all of the gurus that he had. That's what happens when you start seeing the world inside yourself. When you start seeing oneness around, you can learn from anything. You can sit and stare at a rock, and you can say to the rock, and you're from your heart to the rock, teach me. And then you just sit there and stare at the rock and be quiet, and you'll get a lesson. You'll get a teaching. You'll get something beautiful that you didn't that you would not identify as coming from your own mind. Sometimes some very interesting things come up, and it can be with anything, anytime. It doesn't have to be anything profound. I find it's easier for me anyway out in nature when nothing's around, and just sitting and watching a creek and saying, teach me, or watching the waves hit the rocks on the beach and saying, teach me, or looking at the night sky, teach me, and just sitting there in silence. And your interaction with the universe becomes personal, becomes beautiful, and you do get to expand. You do get to have the experience of that wonder, that beauty, that fulfillment, that consciousness in everything. Like Ramakrishna says that story about the young boy, right? Chasing the grasshopper, and the leaves are making noise, and he tells the leaves, shh, I'm trying to catch the grasshopper. And Ramakrishna says that's no accident. That's not just the ignorance of a child. He says that's the innocence of a child that allows it to see consciousness in everything, even the moving dead leaves, recognizing consciousness there. And so we get a delightful access to a wonderful part of life that isn't there when in the life of egoism. Egoism does not let you have that kind of communication, that kind of intimacy, because egoism is always setting up boundaries and trying to promote a stronger sense of its own existence, of its own greatness, of its own worthiness. And so to do that, it has to separate and block out everything else around it. And so this is all, we're barreling toward a singularity here at the speed of who knows, but we're moving this direction. So he says, as long as you think of yourself to be a person, God is also a person. So be careful of that. This is why we have to come to love ourselves. We have to come to know who we really are, not what the condition of our mind is. That's not who we are. Not the condition of our body, because that's not who we are. Right? And as long as we identify ourselves with the faults of mind and the faults of body, we're going to see those same faults of the divine in the divine. We're going to see those same shortcomings in the divine. And it makes our relationship with God very troublesome, because we're angry at a God that we don't know, because we're angry as a person that we don't know. And so this is the whole point of spiritual life, to sort these things out. And you don't really have to worry about what God is. What you have to worry about is what you are. And as you come to know what you are, what God is will become clearer also. Because in the end, you find out they were the same question. So can I change facts by changing attitude? Our questioner asks. Ooh, here's a good one. Here's another one to spend a week meditating on. The attitude is the fact, right? The attitude that you have creates the world you observe, right? If you're in a bad mood, you're in a bad mood. and everything around you is going to be annoying and going to be, provoking and whatnot. It's like, be careful about your attitude. Be careful about your states of mind, which are usually caused by desire. States of mind are caused by desire in its different states of fulfillment and non-fulfillment. And when you get caught in those states of mind, it changes the way the world seems to you. So this is what he's saying. The attitude is the fact, right? This is why we try and clear the mind and try and clear the heart, and why we try and keep our relationships healthy, and why we try and keep our spiritual life healthy and our conscience clear, because that allows us to see God in all things. That allows us to see when when M says to Sri Ramakrishna, this world is suffering. Why is it so much suffering in this world? And Thakur turns to him, what are you saying? This world is a mansion of mirth, right? So understand your attitude, your perspective that you take colors the world that you live in. The world itself can be both heaven or hell. You choose. And that's one of the hardest teachings of all. You choose what it is to you. That's karma, right? Karma is what you're able to do with the way the world appears to you in this moment. If you've got good karma, you can create gold. If you've got bad karma, you can create misery. So understand, this moment is your karma, is your karma. Your experience of this moment is your karma, right? And so it's a thing in the moment. It's not a function of past and a function of future. It's where you are in this moment and what you can do with this moment, how you perceive this moment is karma. So the attitude is the fact. Take anger. I may be furious, pacing the room up and down at the same time. I know what I am, a center of wisdom and love, an atom of pure existence. All subsides and the mind merges into silence. All right. So any of these, and this again is the point of or one of the points of meditation. You can unfold things and let them expand into their truth. Right? Nor when we hold things as being mind knowledge or head knowledge, when we're studying these things as philosophical truths, we disempower them utterly. They only become a little piece stored in a spot, and then we draw relationship lines between that and all the other things that we think. But when you can sit there and understand the unity and change the perspective from which you are looking at all of these ideas, all of these philosophies, then they can be allowed to merge. And this is sort of what's going on in my head these days with the idea of different religions really disappearing from my mental vocabulary, seeing that there's one religion and that religion is life, and that there's one practice of that religion and that is awareness, and there's one scripture to that religion, the moment. And all of the varieties that we experience come out of those three truths. And so if you can see the unity or assume the unity that you are hearing from Sri Nisargadatta right now, and sit with that and hold that perspective, then what he says becomes true. All subsides and the mind merges into silence. And in that silence is perfection. In that silence is love. In that silence is infinite wisdom. And it's all spontaneously available in the moment to you, to spread evenly and fully everywhere. Still, you are angry sometimes, Maharaj, With whom am I to be angry with? And for what? This is something that I've used for years. I didn't say it with anger. I said with annoyance. I said when somebody, because I guess my problem wasn't so much with anger as much as it was with being annoyed by people. And so I would ask myself, I said, okay, whoa. Chidbram, back up. First of all, who's being annoyed, right? Because there's nothing that can be annoyed except for an ego. And who is there to annoy, right? If there's one without a second, if everything is within me, who is there to be annoyed and who is there to annoy? And that's how I would dismiss that when I would become aware. And this is why we practice awareness, because you can see your mind grab these things. You can walk through a room, and somebody in there, the most annoying person that you know is there, and suddenly you're annoyed. And usually that happens without you realizing that it happened. You just suddenly feel this annoyingness and you respond to it, you react to it. And then you're in the cat's fight, it's over. But when you develop a mind that becomes aware of any disturbance and that thought of annoyance comes, you can catch it and put that little baseball mitt of spiritual practice up there, catch it, say, hey, who's there to annoy? And who's there to be, to be annoyed? Both of those are functions of ego. Neither of them are true. Let go, move on. Be wise. Understand the nature of things. And so this is how we take these very high truths that seem to have no practical value. What is one without a second? Good Lord, how can I even think of that? Well, you can't. But you can still package it in a way that becomes useful because it points to a reality. It points to where you're going, to a truth. And so even though the mind can't contain that truth just because of its nature, it can still look in the direction that that truth is pointing. Right? It can still you can still become aware of where something is pointing. And this goes back to that beauty we just started the whole talk with, where you can learn from everything. When you start realizing everything is within you, you can hear everything. And in your silence, things teach, things speak, because it is all your beloved on the journey anyway. It's all your beloved. And it's all coming from a voice of love, and it's all coming from a voice of wisdom. And if you can hold on to that, holding on to that is what faith is. If you can hold on to these higher truths that we intuitively know are true, but our mind simply won't accept, that's faith. That's the process of faith, saying, no, I believe that the universe is love, and I believe that it's wise, it's wisdom, intelligence, and I believe that it is existence. And so you sit there and realign your mind. That's the role of faith. It helps you realign your mind instead of being victim of your mind, being subject to your mind. All right. Oh, it's 10:03. So let's stop there for today.